You think your secrets are safe, that your daily routine is private. But for these people, their lives became a playbook for a predator who was always watching and always one step ahead. 3 stories, 3 victims, and a stalker who seemed to be everywhere at once. Let's examine the evidence. Our first story begins with Clara, a graphic designer who embraced the future. Her apartment wasn't just a home, it was a network with smart lights, a smart thermostat, and smart speakers in every room. It began subtly. A song she despised, Seasons in the Sun, would start playing at 3 a.m. from the speaker in her bedroom. She'd wake up, heart pounding, and shut it off, blaming a software glitch. Then came the cold. In the middle of July, the thermostat would plummet to 55 degrees. She'd find herself shivering under her blankets, the air so cold she could see her breath. She reset the system, changed her passwords. It didn't stop. The initial intrusions are always dismissed as errors. It's a psychological defense, because the alternative is too terrifying to consider. One evening, while working late on a deadline, the lights in her apartment began to flicker. Not randomly, but in a steady, rhythmic pulse. Thump thump, thump thump. She froze, listening. She checked her fitness watch. The flickering lights were perfectly in sync with her own elevated heart rate. It wasn't a glitch. It was a message. He was in the network. He was watching her biometrics. He knew she was scared, and this psychological reaction appeared to be his goal. This is the turning point. The moment the victim realizes the threat isn't just external, it's inside the walls with them. The final violation came through the device meant to give her peace of mind, her indoor security camera. She had bought it after the flickering light incident, hoping to catch a hacker. She was making tea, her back to the camera, when a voice, distorted and low, crackled from its tiny speaker. It wasn't a human voice. It was a synthesized text-to-speech, cold and robotic. "You seem troubled tonight, Clara. Did you finish your project?" She unplugged everything. She smashed the router with a hammer. She fled her apartment with nothing but her wallet and keys, leaving her entire digital life behind. She was never going back. Clara's stalker was never identified. A digital ghost. Which brings us to a case where the threat was terrifyingly physical. Meet Marcus. Marcus had just moved into a pre-war apartment building, the kind with thick walls and hardwood floors that seemed to groan with a deep, mournful sound. He valued his quiet, predictable routine. He lived on the 2nd floor. From day one, he was aware of the tenant above him. Not because they were loud, but because they were uncannily synchronized. When Marcus's alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., he would hear the faint whir of a coffee grinder from the apartment directly above. When he sat at his desk to work, a chair would scrape across the floor in the exact same spot overhead. It's called auditory pareidolia. The brain seeks patterns in random noise. But what if the patterns aren't random? He tried to dismiss it. An old building, thin floors. Coincidence. But the coincidences kept piling up. He started cooking a curry one night, the smell of garlic and turmeric filling his small kitchen. Minutes later, the same exact smell, garlic, turmeric, cumin, began to drift down from the heating vent in his ceiling. It was identical. The person above was cooking the same meal at the same time. Paranoia began to set in. He felt like a puppet, his every move being mimicked by an unseen puppeteer on the floor above. He started changing his routine, eating at odd hours, sleeping on the couch. The sounds followed him. The stalker's goal here is psychological dominance. By mirroring the victim, they erase their sense of individuality and control. The breaking point was a small, folded piece of paper slipped under his door. There was no note, just a string of characters written in neat, block letters. It was his Wi-Fi password. Someone wasn't just listening through the floor. They were inside his network. They had crossed a digital barrier. He was no longer just being heard, he was being read. That night, unable to sleep, he lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. He heard a new sound, a low, buzzing hum, the sound of a power drill. It went on for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. He got a stepladder. His heart was a drum against his ribs. There, directly above his pillow, was a new hole. It was no bigger than a pencil lead. He peered closer and saw a glint, the reflection of his own terrified eye in a tiny lens. The police entered apartment 3B the next day. It was empty of furniture, but it wasn't empty. The floorboards were lined with contact microphones. The vents were fitted with acoustic sensors. A powerful Wi-Fi antenna was pointed at the floor, and on a small crate in the corner sat a stack of notebooks. 7:14 a.m. Subject is brushing his teeth, left side first. 10:32 p.m. Subject is watching a movie, a comedy, judging by the rhythm of his breathing. The stalker was gone. Only his obsession remained. Sometimes the threat isn't a ghost in the machine or a phantom in the ceiling. Sometimes it's an entire community. This is the story of Jenna. Jenna moved to Harmony Creek for a fresh start. It was the quintessential small town, a single main street, a friendly mailman, and neighbors who brought over apple pie. It felt safe. It felt perfect. The perfection began to feel strange. The woman at the general store would say things like, "Oh, you're buying ginger tea again. That cough's still bothering you." Jenna had only ever mentioned her cough to her mother over the phone. The librarian recommended a book about restoring antique furniture, a hobby Jenna had just started and hadn't told anyone about. "Just got a feeling you'd like it," he said with a wink. Everyone seemed to know her, better than she knew herself. In a small town, information is currency. Gossip becomes surveillance. But what happens when that surveillance is weaponized? Anonymous gifts started appearing on her porch. A rare orchid she'd admired in a catalog. A first edition book she'd mentioned wanting on a private social media page, visible only to a few trusted friends. The gifts were a display of knowledge, a demonstration of access. It was a power play designed to isolate her, to make her question everyone she knew. Who was the source? The answer was everyone. Then came the envelope in her mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single photograph, printed on glossy paper. It was her, asleep in her bed, taken from outside her window. The flashbulb's reflection was visible in the glass. This crosses the final line. The stalker is no longer passive. They are actively, physically intruding on the victim's safest space. In a panic, she ran next door to Mr. Abernathy's house, the kind elderly man who was the town's unofficial historian. She tearfully showed him the photo. He just smiled a sad, gentle smile. "We just want to make sure you're safe, dear," he said, leading her inside. "We keep an eye on everyone. It's how we keep Harmony Creek so harmonious." He showed her his study. The walls were covered, floor to ceiling, with photographs, timelines, and notes. Decades of meticulous observation of everyone in town. And in the center, a new, large board. It was all about her. Her entire life was mapped out. Phone records, credit card statements, even transcripts of conversations. He knew things her own parents didn't. He wasn't just a stalker. He was the curator of the town's collective obsession. Horror isn't one person, it's the system. A prison where all the guards are smiling neighbors. Jenna fled the house and ran to her car. The tires were flat. All 4 of them had been punctured. She looked down the street. The mailman stopped his truck to watch her. The baker stood in her doorway, arms crossed. Mr. Abernathy watched from his porch. They were all watching. They had always been watching. And they weren't going to let her leave. Of chorus of distorted, overlapping whispers. You lock your doors, you draw your blinds, but you can't stop the whispers. You can't stop the eyes. We know you.